The slight delay. We are now recording. Today, this is the Assembly Budget and Finance Committee of the Whole. Today is Thursday, May 15th. We are noticed from 12:10 to 1:10 p.m. today. And then we'll go through and do introductions, and then we'll move into our business. So starting with Mr. Johnson.
Zach Johnson.
Aaron Baldwin Day.
Yarrow Silvers.
Daniel Volant.
Anna Brawley. And then on the phone, we have Mr. Myers. Maybe we have Mr. Myers and Mr. Martinez.
Present, thank you.
Okay, and if anybody else is on the phone, just speak up. And we are also joined by
This is
Assembly
Ian
Council.
Mills.
Sorry, who was that?
This is Ian Mills, Budget Advisory Commission Chair.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we'll get to you in just a minute. Thank you. So we have the BAC Chair, Assembly Council, members from the administration, and some folks in the back in the audience. So we will move through our business. I will note, as usual, we have a lot of these standing reports, just items that we will touch on. We're only going to go through a few of those briefly, and then we will get into the main part of our business, which is really some education sessions. We are joined by a special guest, one of our former OMB directors and current Community and Economic Development Director, Mr. Lance Wilbur. So we will get to his presentation when we move through our other business. So first I'll go back up and I will ask Mr. Mills to introduce yourself and give your report. Thank you.
Thank you. As mentioned before, my name is Ian Mills. I'm the recently elected chair of the Budget Advisory Commission. I've been on the commission since last year, appointed by Mayor LaFrance, and looking forward to being the chair and hopefully keeping some of the momentum we've been able to pick up in the last few months going. We do have a couple vacancies that we're still trying to fill. In terms of recent actions, after our two resolutions regarding Project Anchorage, Member Tamani brought forward conversations about a motion regarding the fuel excise tax. I think some of you may already be aware about the conversations that the commission has been having on that subject with regards to how the money may be used. We are also looking at engaging in conversations in conjunction with other folks about revenue options, broader revenue picture that the Muni might have, and recommendations we might have for how to move forward on some of those issues. I don't have a ton to say. I'm new. I'm happy to be here, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mills. Any questions from members? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so thank you for being here, and we look forward to working with you further. Okay, next let's move on. Essentially, we have some papers in front of us, so I am going to generally turn things over to Ms. Browse, our OMB director, because we will get some updates. I think we are not going to hear one from the Trust Fund Board, but I will mention for tomorrow, there is a work session scheduled to discuss is AO 2025-30, the trust fund manager, and just generally giving us an overview of the MOA trust. So we'll come back to that topic. And from there, I will turn it to Ms. Browse. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to members, what we have in front of us is the 2025 budget to actuals report through March 31st. The first page is the general government by department. The second page is the general government by department in the categories of labor and non-labor. So you're able to see where the spend is actually occurring. We have the report on overtime usage by department, as well as the travel budgets, which are restricted specifically to be held in their own account and accounted for separately than all other items in budgets, and the alcohol tax and the marijuana tax. Right now, as of the report, it was about it was 25% through the year, and you'll see at the bottom of the first page that overall the municipality was 26% spent. So for the most part, we're on track with the year. The outlier on this report is the chief administrative officer and the divisions underneath that office. This is 42% here because the venues division pays the Performing Arts Center and the museum for the entire year in January. So the contract that is for 12 months goes out the door in January. So the spend looks a little higher. And if you look at the second page, you can see the breakout between the labor side of the chief administrative office being 22% on line 2, and the non-labor being 43%. So that's where the contractual increase shows. But everybody else is, looking relatively good. Some of the other departments that are a little hot are also because non-labor costs go out initially in lump sums at the beginning of the year. Any questions?
Questions from members?
And
I
go
have a
ahead.
couple actually. Yeah. So first, can you speak to, and I know there was actually a news article about this recently. I see M&O is, below that 25%. So it's underspent in theory. I wonder if you could unpack, is that because we had less snow? Is it something that they mainly spend in the summer? Kind of, is there a seasonality there? So that's the first question.
That's a very good question, and I don't know the answer to it, but Lance Wilbur might. Do you know specifically if there was anything this year?
Through the chair, your intuitions are correct. Just the lack of snow in the first part of the snow season, we just didn't spend what we had originally thought, compared to previous years.
Thanks. And I see a question from Ms. Baldwin-Day.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Is that the same scenario for, I'm reading correctly across many lines. Is that the same for Parks and Recreation? Is that also a seasonally flexible expenditure?
Through the chair to Member Baldwin-Day, I think that's right. We can ask Parks and Rec specifically why they may be running a little leaner than normal if it's not related to the labor costs and vacancies.
Okay, thank you. And I had one other question just in general, because I know this is something we implemented in the last year. Can you just briefly explain what this supplementals column is? And then I see on the bottom too, it's noting the detail, but just kind of explaining what that is.
Yeah, so the supplemental changes that you'll see in the budget worksheets come from the timeframe when the Assembly makes additional budget changes outside of the November and April budget process. So we do the proposed and approved budget in the November timeframe, and that is our budget moving forward. Once we do the revised budget in April, those budget changes are adopted as our standing budget. But other budget changes are made throughout the year when things arise or we have to move funds from one department to another. And so those are called supplementals. You'll see the column on the first page reflects supplemental budget adjustments. And then the detail for each of those supplementals is given at the bottom of the page. The 2024 year-end budget to actuals, the supplemental column, particularly for maintenance and operations, had about 8 letters out the side of it because there were multiple revisions to that budget, either adding or moving funding. And so depending on how much activity takes place in a year, the documents with the supplemental follow-on can be lengthy. But right now we've just got a few.
Yep, Ms. Baldwin-Day.
Separately, I'm curious about particularly the non-labor costs for public transportation. It's running pretty hot, and I'm just curious if there is what the reasoning is for that, the 66% of the non-labor budget spent at this point.
Through the chair to member Baldwin Day. One of the challenges with reading the document that you have in front of you is that you see the total non-labor budget, in the first column of the non-labor section. Then the actuals are what is spent and has gone out the door. So on public transportation, there's an $11.2 million budget. What has gone out the door is 1.1. What has been encumbered, which means it's being reserved within an account for a specific expense, is $6 million. So the spend, the percentage spend includes the encumbrances. So it's any money that may just be sitting there reserved to be spent throughout the rest of the year. So we can ask public transit specifically what the $6 million encumbrance is for, but otherwise the actual spend out the door would be significantly less than that.
Gotcha. That's very helpful. Yeah, and I would be interested just to know what that 6 million is earmarked for,
Yeah.
Particularly since public transportation is one of those things I care about. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And also note, we were joined by Mr. Constant just a minute ago. So I don't see, do you have a question? No, okay. I don't see additional questions if you'd like to continue.
I think, if there are specific questions about the overtime and or travel budgets, we can discuss those. I think the travel budget in particular is relatively small if a department even has a travel budget, and the usage of it may or may not be fluid throughout the year. So it's a tricky one to grade based on percentage spent. But the alcohol tax on page 5, what I would say is the good thing when you look at the alcohol tax is that a lot of the money is out the door or has been encumbered for a specific use already. And we've had multiple years of the alcohol tax struggling to get out the door to the community providers that it's supposed to go to, or even to the departments that it's supposed to go to. And so it's nice to see that so many of them are either out or encumbered to specifically go towards those providers already before, the end of first quarter.
Questions on that? Okay, not seeing any. Ms. Baldwin Day.
I'm just curious, once we've had a little time to sit with this, I'd love to have a little time to go through and flag other questions. What would be the best way for us to communicate those questions to you beyond this meeting?
I think it depending on through the chair how she would like to do it. I'm game for direct emails, text messages, or we can meet if you have a long list and you want to go through it in person. If there's a lot of nuance that goes with that, we can do that. Absolutely.
Lovely. Yeah, I might have some newbie questions.
Great.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would definitely encourage meeting with Ms. Browse and her team when you can. And also for individual departments, you can also reach out to the director and just ask for a walkthrough of their budget as well, because they'll be able to tell you kind of where it goes in more detail. Oh, Ms. Silvers, question?
General question. We recently had I think a settlement. Are those going above the tax cap or under the tax cap, and where do those go?
Through the chair to member Silvers, the settlements that are distributed at any point throughout a year are either absorbed within a department, appropriated via the assembly through an outside action, or they are collected, or I should say, and they are collected via the tax cap in any subsequent year. So what we're able to do is determine whether or not the settlements need to be collected outside the tax cap. If there's a small dollar settlement and a department is able to absorb it within their budget in any given year, then that may not be collected outside. But if there are larger dollar settlements that need to be collected outside the tax cap, then they would be collected in the subsequent year or any following years, depending on when the collection actually needs to take place.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Constant?
It's an interesting question. It's probably a legal question, but when you say any subsequent year, would that And would that suggest that if it happened in year A, and then that was year A's budget, but year D, we decided to try to collect it outside of the cap, that we could?
To the chair, or through the chair to the chair. I think, I think it is a legal question, but I think the answer to that is it depends on why the delay in the recollection occurred. I don't know if there is a legal limitation on when it can be collected, but if there were to be a settlement that was then hung up in some sort of appeal process or some other condition,
Right.
it could be a later date.
Right.
But we can ask legal if
Yeah,
there's a
that's
specific
that's a
timeframe.
really clear why, like, because it wasn't a final action until a period in time many years forward. But it raises a vision in my head of scrubbing the calendar or the budget for the past 5 years for unfunded, funded through the regular budget process settlements, and coming up with a pool and then leveraging that in year 5, right? Like a recapture period. I don't know how that would work. So that's a sidebar and a rabbit hole, but attorneys, there's a question for you.
And through the chair to the chair. I think we can do a specific look to see if there are any that are outstanding, but I would venture to guess that OMB has already done that and determined whether or not they should or could be recollected for the last 5 anyway. But we can keep an eye on that going forward.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think we can continue on.
That's it for me. I mean, in terms of reports, unless there are questions.
Okay, I don't see additional questions. So these are the reports that we get pretty much every month. And now that we're far enough along into 2025, we can actually start getting a picture of where we're at. So this is helpful. Then next, I'll just run down this list. I know we have 8 things under our standing reports. We did number 1, we did number 4. Do you perhaps have any updates on Building Safety Service Area, FEMA and ARPA, ML&P?
No, through the chair to the members, that is basically standing as the last report that we gave, which is that all issues that were previously identified are either have been resolved or are being resolved. FEMA and ARPA and the BSSA, I think we will have more information for you at the next Budget and Finance Committee meeting, specifically BSSA and additional ARPA updates. But it looks like we're on track to be totally spent. And I think the conversation that I had with Mr. Thurn last week was that we have maybe 5 or 6 grantees that are still open on ARPA. And so it's not a whole lot. So we're making good progress on that one.
Great. Questions on any of that? Okay. And then last, we'll just check in. Is there an update? I know we already finished first quarter budget revisions, but if we want to give an after action on that.
And through the chair to members, the first quarter budget revisions are complete, as you know, but the budget has been loaded. The departments are now moving on their new, set budgets. The good thing that we heard was that the bond package was passed a little bit earlier, at least approved to be issued by the Assembly a couple weeks earlier, which means that the departments can get started earlier on their construction season, et cetera. So it was nice for them to have a couple weeks of lead time on that. And we'll endeavor to keep that going for the future. But otherwise, everything seems to be going well. I think if we have any additional changes that we need to make, we will bring them before the body and or discuss them here at this committee.
Any questions on that? Okay, not seeing any there as well. So let's move on to the fun part of our meeting, the most fun part. So I will turn it over to Mr. Wilbur. I believe we have a presentation as well.
May I interrupt for a moment?
Yes,
Chair?
please.
I would like to give Lance a small lead in terms of this because I have known Lance and actually worked with him during that.
Yeah, please be the opener.
But Lance has spent his entire career as a public servant, and 98% of it has been at the municipality. There was a small stint at the state, but people come back here. And he was the OMB director from 2015 to 2021, and I was able to learn a lot from him and his depth. Then transferred into the OMB office, and so I'm going to cry. This is really silly. So much of what I know is because Lance did so well at his job and like making it clear for all of us to understand. And so luckily, former Vice Chair Zalatel gave us a gift on the way out the door and said, Lance do his presentations for the new members so that they can see the content. It's great. It's very clear. And, you know, people said, well, why don't you do it? You're the director. And I say, we phone a friend and tap the OMB Director Emeritus Network. And Lance is luckily still employed with it, so it didn't take that much to get him to do it.
All right, thank you. I think I am gonna, on new business, I'm gonna spend most of my time actually talking about the types of money. I think I'm gonna spend probably not very much on the fundamentals. I think many of you may have seen some presentations. So if you know, basically the fundamentals of the budget itself, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that. One of the things that and then the tax cap, I hadn't prepared to talk much about that, but what I want to spend a lot of time on is to let the assembly members know sort of the importance of knowing the color of the money in which you're trying to deal with when you're trying to purchase something, whether you're trying to buy a commodity or you're trying to buy a service. And so I have a presentation, I'm gonna go through that. I'm gonna spend some time on service areas. I don't know if many of you are familiar with service areas. I know Assemblymember Johnson is, Assemblymember McCormick, and both of the folks from Eagle River. But those who might not be as familiar with that, you might sort of underappreciate the need to understand the service areas and where they are and where they overlap. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I have a little exercise at the end. We have some time. When we get to the Anchorage area, the service area that would apply to Eagle River and Girdwood, little exercise to sort of illustrate about where the money goes when you pay your tax bill. A little exercise about how to do that. So I'm going to bring up my presentation. Yep.
And while they are switching around, I'll just note, education about the budget is going to be an ongoing focus in this committee and likely some work sessions as well in advance of when we actually take up the FY26 budget. So, so on these other topics, we will come back to those as well. So when you guys are ready, just feel free to proceed.
It's 5 or 6 years since I've given this show. And when Meg said, Lance, I committed you to do the color of money. And I'm like, oh, I noticed it. I'll be happy to do it. When we get done. What's that? Thank you.
Oh, presentation. See what it's in the room, trying to figure this out.
All right. Before I start, let me maybe share a little of experience that I had in the Office of Management and Budget, because I think for the new members, you won't genuinely appreciate the talent in that group of 4 until either one, as Meg had mentioned, I wish I would have learned this 3 years ago when she started her second term. And I think just a lot of what I learned, what I'm going to share, I learned from Maryland, Courtney, and Christine. And I think the 4 of us really put a team together because they have a team similar to the team that I think ONA has right now. ONA has a gift to make complex things simple. And I think that is something that I tried to bring, and something that when I gave this presentation the first time, I actually did it a long time ago to a rural road service area. And they said, why am I spending my money to pave the roads down in the bowl that aren't plowed? And I said, because you don't pay for them. And they're like, what do you mean I don't pay for them? And I'm like, you don't. You pay for the roads in your service area. Similar conversation with other folks, when it came to bonds. And so understanding sort of the details of all of that, and then sort of understanding a way in which I could illustrate it simply. So I'm going to attempt to do that with this. Oh, great. So I'm going to start off with many of you, many of the folks who've been on the assembly, this is pretty elementary, but one of the important things to sort of start off with is that there are three basic types of budgets. And the reason this is important is because the color of the money that funds each of these is different. It's not money that you can take necessarily from one and automatically apply it to the others. So share that a little bit. So I'm going to talk mostly about the general government operating budget and not so much about the capital budget, but the important about the capital budget is primarily with bonds, and you can't use it on operating things. You can't use it to, support police unless you're buying vehicles for them. And then the utilities and operating budgets, that money does not mix with the other two. Okay, so if you see money in one, and they pretty much stand on their own. The utilities and enterprises are independent. They are not supported with tax funds. They can receive similar types of grant money for capital. It could go to general government or it could go to a utility. So it's important to just recognize that as we move forward here and we're talking about the types of money, it's important to recognize the types of budgets. And Madam Chair, if you guys have questions when I get in here, just jump in and I'll just save me a little time for a little fun exercise I have for you. So the types of monies, I think I never really realized how complex this was as I came into the Office of Management and Budget when I worked at the Transit Department before I came to OMB, and before that I worked in the Traffic Department. And before that, I worked in the planning department. And each one of those things, what I learned is if you were to go into the traffic department, for example, there's 4 different divisions. One of them is completely funded with state grant money. The other 2 are not. And the one that is basically is to fund the operations of our traffic signal system. Mr. Coy has mentioned that to you. If you go into public transportation, you'll recognize that they receive a significant amount of federal grant money to run the maintenance of the bus shop. It's not significantly paid for by property taxes. The property taxes pay for the bus drivers. So when you're looking at how you're going to spend that money, it's really important to know the color that you're working with and the source. So again, when you're looking at the budget, it's important to recognize right now we've got 140 different sources of money that come in to support the government. 5 of them make up, basically 60% of it. The rest of it's just nickels and dimes. But it's important to know where that is. So, again, there's the different kinds of money that we worked on the budget for the colors of money. We have local money, tax money, we have state money. They could be grants. They could be grants for operating. They could be like the health department. They could be federal for either one. We have investment money that has a lot of things that we can and can't spend it on. Then we have special taxes that we have to spend things on. We have a room tax. We're allowed to spend that a lot on general government, but we get $45 million and really only get 1/3 of it to spend in operations. 1/3 of it goes to ACBB and 1/3 of it goes to pay for that building across the street. So the debt on that building. So it's really important to sort of understand those types of things. And I'm just trying to give you guys a general sense of overview. My point is not that you remember each one of these things. My point is to just recognize that when you are looking at things that you want to accomplish, things that you want to trade, what you can and can't do with that money, and there's always a trade-off. It's rarely an ad. And if it is, it's a one-time. And if it's not a one-time, you're really going to probably give something up unless you find some more money. So there's a key between difference of operating and capital funds, utilities we talked about, and then I want to talk primarily about service areas. Because I think service areas, we have, and I'll mention them here, we got about 35 of them, which means which are different than tax districts. They can be the same, but they might not. And I'll give you an example. The building service area, service area, it is its own special area inside area wide. It just happens to be in the same area as parks, police, and fire. But in some places, when you get particularly towards the hillside, the line moves around a lot. So it's important to know. The reason that I bring this piece up is that our budget, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about grants. I mentioned some of this stuff. Grants, we get a lot of different kinds of grants and we use them for a variety of different things. For those of you who have been doing this or work in an industry where you do receive grants, you got to appreciate, there's strings attached. When I was in the Office of Management and Budget and someone would come to me and said, Lance, the Department of so-and-so at the federal level is going to give us $10 million. What do you think my first question was? That would have been my second. My first one was, what's the match? If the match is 20%, I go, where am I going to get $2 million to make this real? And then they're going, oh, but here's the good news. The good news is we can do in kind, which means it's not cash. My point there is that when you guys have grants or departments have grants, OMB asks a lot of difficult questions. It's not because they're not in support of the idea. What's it for? It's because in order for them to create something that can actually be done, those things are important to recognize. Here's some examples inside the budget that are a blend of these things that are not in the general government, necessarily in the general government operating budget paid by taxes. I mentioned where there's police and there's some equipment, women in infants and children's. When you look at the health department budget, there's sort of two pieces to it. There's about half of it is general government and half of it's state grants. It's almost split down the middle. So half of the health department is basically grant funded, either by the state or by the feds. So when you're looking at what you want to do in the health department, you got to recognize where that stuff's coming from. We talked about public transportation. We talked about traffic, a little bit about EMS. There's examples all over the board. So, and at the end of this, I'm going to give you a couple tips. If you just,
And I would add through the chair that for visibility into what those grants are, by department, they are listed within the budget book. So if they have a recurring grant or an operational grant, you'll see it as a page in each of the individual departmental budgets. If you want to look for that specifically, you can dig into it to see if there's anything interesting.
so the way the municipality's budget is basically built, we operate on a service area concept. You basically get what you pay for. And not everybody pays the same and not everybody gets the same. And I'm just going to rant, like we'll have the Anchorage Roads and Service drainage area is different than a limited road service area up on the hillside. They may just deal with roads and drainage, but don't have any lights. Eagle River does roads and drainage, and then they have a separate one for lights. So you have to know all of those kind of things and the intricacies of those things. And I say no, I just mean being aware. Okay, there's no way you're going to study. Hell, I did it for 6 years and I'm still learning. So it's a lot to know. But most of this presentation is about awareness, is more than it is about taking notes and going, what did he say? It's about a frame of mind, not about the details. We have some service areas that are area wide: library, traffic, ambulance, health. We have some that are not: police, fire, parks. There's a variety of others that are not. They may be multiple separate service areas, but they're not the same. So when you look inside the budget, and I'll give you a little tip in the back, if you're thirsty for knowledge and wanted to know exactly what each one is, there is an elegant table that is put together inside by OMB that talks about how much each one of those service areas pays. You can do a comparison.
Ms. Silvers.
So if the service area says, oh, we want to pay more taxes to do, does that come under the tax cap as well? So does that
It would depend on the service area. Yeah. For example, the ones that are pretty much on the hillside or others, they probably wouldn't. But yeah, that's a good question. I think we.
And through the chair to member Silvers, it's something like the building safety service area is part of the tax cap. So if we wanted to raise money for a project within the BSSA, it would take up space from the tax cap, and then we would have to cut items from general government or from other, general government expenses. The local road service areas are not, and so they can adjust and vote themselves into a different threshold if they are not limited by their own special voted tax caps. So I think you do have to study to know which ones are in and which ones are out.
Yeah. Okay, I think I have some general illustrations of the service areas, and I got some maps here. And so let's just talk about the Girdwood area, service area. So I think I passed out a handout, and I'll reference that so I can see it. Girdwood's kind of unique. So basically on the map, you've got the boundary, you've got a road service area. ARTSA, you'll recognize there is no Anchorage Roads and Service Drainage area inside Girdwood. Girdwood has its own separate roads and service area. They have their own park service area, their own fire service area, and they are not in the Anchorage Police Service area. That is why they contract out police service with the city of Whittier. So that was, something that they elected to do, something that was put together. And so this is about as simple as it gets. And they are assessed, and each one of those types of services are assessed differently for the folks in Girdwood. So when they get their assessment, it's based on what they want to do for parks, what they want to do for fire, what they want to do for roads. But what they are also in is they are in area wide. So and when they look at their area wide, they get assessed for libraries and transit, and ambulances, and all of the services that are area wide. So this is a simple illustration of a pretty simple service area inside the Girdwood area. Now it starts to get a little complicated. The next one is the Chugach Eagle River area. Again, what you'll see here, let's just look at the blue. Let me back up one. Notice there's no blue on Girdwood. The blue is the police service area. So the police service area covers all of this. In Chugach Eagle River, there's 2 fire service areas. And they have their own road service area. I'm going to draw a little, so my cursor will show up on here. Won't show up on here. But basically just a little bit below Eagle River, right above the key, you'll see a yellow line. Kind of goes on J-Bear. That's the ARTSA road service area. Believe it or not, it covers all of J-Bear, but we don't plow the roads on J-Bear. So, but again, they have a different and unique road service area. Parks, they have their own separate parks service area, and but they are all in area wide, and the police service area. And then my last one is the bowl. This is where it gets a little elegant. So inside the Anchorage Bowl, you'll see that we have the boundary. Everything's in blue. So everything in there is covered in the police service area until you get down to what looks like about Indian. And then south on the highway, it's not in the police service area. You'll see that basically the fire service area and the parks service area are pretty much the same line, except there's a little blip on the hillside where the fire service area goes further out boundaries than the park service area. The reason the park service area is important is if we want to spend bonds, we can only spend them in that area. When we gather taxes, we can only spend them in that area. The way the rules are written, you get to spend bond money on things you own and basically property taxes that's on our land. We don't spend our money on federal lands. We don't spend it at the airport. We don't spend it in Chugach State Park. It's spent inside those service areas. Individuals that live in the park service area, they are assessed for the services of all things parks. I want you to remember this part. There's a difference in the fire service area. The fire service area and the ambulance service area are not the same. Ambulances are area-wide. Fire service is not. So that's important to know when you're looking at the budget. And you know how when ambulance service and they're seeking reimbursement for transport from the state, that comes back into the ambulance side of the house.
Mr.
All right.
Carlson has a question.
Thanks, Lance. Would you at some point send me forward the law or the guidance that establishes what you just said? Not the bond piece, I get that piece, the tax piece.
Yep.
A tax levy must be spent within the area. I would like to understand where
Yep.
that originates from.
Okay, I will do
Thanks.
that. Thank you. All right, I think, given the time, huh?
I'll do that, thanks.
Thank you. I forget I don't work there anymore. It's like yeah, hey, you can leave, but you never do.
Ms. Baldwin Day.
Yeah, just a follow-up question about area-wide services. So library, traffic, ambulance, health.
I'll give you the list. I can't remember them all. That's the big
Okay,
ones.
yeah, I would just be really curious to know,
Yes.
like, what are the things that are in the light?
Planning.
And, oh, okay,
Planning is area-wide.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank
I also see Mr. Gates.
I might be scared. Thank you. I have just a quick response to that ask to Mr. Wilbur and Ms. Sprouse about the legal source for that spending service area revenue only in the service area. It's our charter, section 901, how the service areas. 901B has a sentence: services provided in a service area shall be financed by a uniform tax levy within the area. And I think that sort of leads into all that they just talked about. So that's the beginning, and maybe providing more.
If I might. So I think that's a different question answered than the one that I asked, I think. In particular, I'll be specific, and that's the Chugach area, Chugach Access Service Area. The bonds I get, we can't bond for material outside of our service area, outside of the municipality. But I haven't yet seen any definitive answer, and that citation that you just read doesn't answer the question of why we couldn't pay for from tax levies in the service area for access out of into the park on parklands, right? I just don't know why we couldn't if it is directly associated to the function of the service area. And so what I am wanting to understand is if there is an actual legal barrier that says we can't spend the tax levy as not opposed to the bonds, the tax levy on a parking lot in the Chugach area, Chugach State Park that's fed right by a road in the service area. So I want to understand that. Now, again, I get the bonds and why you can't with bonds because you need the asset. The asset is held by investors and paid over time. But the taxes, I want to understand the legal boundary. And what Dean just wrote was on the revenue side, not on the expense side.
And Mr. Vaughn has a question.
Thank you. So when I'm looking at this map, and the different service, like a lot of the service areas, I think are services that come to you. So if you're in the fire service area, the fire department comes to you. If there's a fire, the police come to you. If there's a public safety issue, the roads, the maintenance crews come to you. The one to me that seems like the outlier is park service area, because a lot of the folks who are not in the park's boundary, the park service area, still use our parks. People who are outside of that boundary may come to Kincaid Park and enjoy it, essentially to them for free. And so I guess I think it's interesting. Why? I guess my question is, why don't those areas have to contribute toward parks, and how would a change in that be effectuated?
Through the chair, I'll give it a start. When the service areas, I would have to go back to find out when the service areas were created, but many of the service areas actually were originally established in unification. So the boundaries identified might be as a result of when their boundaries were during unification and then developed her outside of the boundary. So I think it's probably some of that. There is the ability to change the boundary, but it requires an affirmative vote of two groups of people, those in and those out. Thanks.
Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the parks example is like, it's a good one, but it's so small by comparison. The real issue is the roads. And so the functional reality, we mentioned there's a library area-wide fee, right? Everybody pays for the library. But those who live and have their properties in service areas don't pay for the roads outside of their service area that they drive every day to get to work or to that library. And so we as ARTSA are underwriting the daily transportation of everybody in and out of the municipality who isn't in the ARTSA service area. And so it's an excellent question. And the breadth of it is so much bigger when you think about the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that are spent every year on maintaining the roadways in this municipality. So I don't know how we square it. It's an issue and it's interesting. And that's why for the new members, you see sometimes pretty contentious conversations about what's happening on Hillside and who's paying and why. And it's the never ending story of the Anchorage experience.
So, Madam Chair, I have, if in the remaining 10 minutes, I got a little exercise I'd like you guys to participate in, but it's going to require me to get out of my chair, or I'm going to need some help from Ona. So how about because I think before I kind of give you my last points, I want to make a point about when you look at all of the service areas and all the things that we talked about, when you get your tax bill, where does it all go? Because the tax bill is a combination of if you live inside or outside. And even if you are outside of ARTSA, but in a road service area, you're still paying for roads inside your area, but you're not contributing to the roads inside, as Assemblymember Constant mentioned, outside. So if you go shopping at Costco, there's no Costco's on the hillside, how you get there. And then my last point is, remember, even inside the ARTSA boundaries or outside, the municipality is only responsible for half of them. We don't own the other half. They're owned by the Department of Transportation. So your taxes don't pay for any of that either. So let me give you guys a little exercise and show you how your tax bill's paid.
And just really quick, so we have about 10 minutes left. We could extend by just a few minutes because we did start late, but I also want to see if there's anybody here for audience participation. If we need to plan for that. Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I think we can go to the full time.
All right. So is this your last work session of the day? You have more fun after this.
This is it.
This is it? Oh, more fun.
Those who are on
All right.
AMATs have a lot of
So
fun.
this is a sample of your tax bill. Your tax bill looks something like this. Okay, Mr. Constant, what I would like you to do is when you get your tax bill, 40% of the amount of money that's on this thing goes to the school district. So I'm going to do the first one for you. I know it feels good to tear apart your tax bill.
I don't mind paying
I'm going to
taxes.
tear it apart. You own the school district. That's about 40%, roughly $400 million on average. It's going to be different for every single house. It'll be different if you live in Birchwood. It'll be different if you live in another place. All right.
I think I need to demand the state funds their portion then.
What's that?
I said if I'm owning the school district, I need to demand the state funds their portion.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I want you to fold it right about that line. Just fold it, think about it all the way across the board. So that's the, when you look at the budget, you're gonna see a $648 million number. Taxes, it's a variety of taxes, so ripping. So that's $650 million. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna divide $650 million. So Anna, grab a pen. On the back of that, what Anna is holding is 40% of what we spend on general government.
I got it.
Anna's gonna write, what Anna's gonna write on there is public safety. She's gonna write police and fire. That's what we spend on police and fire. This could not have worked out any better based on this. Daniel, if you could fold it right on that one. So that's 40%, that's $260 million. Ribbon, that's ribbon. You don't have to be neat. I mean, no one, when they get their tax bill, they rip it up. All right, so take the big one. All right. Daniel, on that one, I want you to write roads, buildings, and fleet. So that is maintenance and operations, the traffic department, and PM&E. Okay? And for that one,
Here,
I
sorry.
also want.
Lance, for the record, do you mind, Lance, do it for the record, do you mind carrying this?
I'll carry it around. All right. I have so much fun doing this.
Yeah.
So Daniel, on that one, I want you to write two things. One, I want you to write 23% and 150 million. So I also want you to take that, fold about a third of it. Give me a third of it. Just don't rip it. About a third. Right there. Fold it. Mountain over it. Open it. That little piece is basically debt. So in this piece here, and I say debt, it's mostly roads. It's about 70, it's about not quite 70 million. So it's a little bit more than a third. But anyway, that's important to know. All right, here you go. All right, what I want you to do is there's a line about, let me see. See that line right there? Fold that line right there. And rip it up. All right, rip it. It's okay, you don't have to be neat. I'd like to see some aggression. All right, hold on to that one. All right, Yarrow. So on yours, I want you to write parks, transit, the library, and health. That's roughly 13 to 14% of the entire budget. We spend property taxes. That is $84 million. Aaron, take yours, rip it right on that line right there. And we're almost done. Only got to do this 2 more times. That's exactly right, right. And all of these little rough edges, that's the balancing that occurs in the budget. That's how it works. Yeah, all right.
IGCs.
Yeah, the IGCs. Okay, take the small one and give it to Zach, the little one. Yeah. All right. So you basically that is the budget we spend in internal services for the city. That is basically it is everything that's under Bill Falsey. So it will be purchasing, it'll be treasury, property appraisal, HR, finance, IT, the convention center money, and a little bit of money for Bill. That is about $95 million. That's roughly the same percentage. It's a little bit more than what Yarrow's in charge of. Okay? All right, Zach, take that piece of paper, fold it exactly in half. No, the whole, just you can fold it that way. All right. We're almost done. Okay, give the other part to Dean. This is going to work out as well as it did for Daniel. All right, so what you're holding is everything that we spend on land development. That is planning, development services, and real estate. That's roughly 3.5%. And I want you to do something for me. Fold it literally in half. Half of that is real estate, the amount of money we pay when we lease buildings, properties, anything that we do to lease real estate, the Golden Lion, anything that we have that we own is in real estate, and that's about half of it. Okay, what have I not mentioned? The assembly. So on Dean's basically has, you've got the attorney office, you've got the assembly, you got the muni manager, which includes safety, the OEM, you have audit, equal opportunity, equity and justice. Yeah, I mean, get to it. Yeah, no. So that's about the same amount. It's a little bit less than what Zach has in land development. So the reason I show this is that when I showed this presentation to someone, they're like, why do we spend all this money on, the health department? Or why do we spend all this money on roads? Or why do we spend all this money on police? They're like, compared to what? So I think it's important for you guys when you're looking at the budget. There's a really elegant table. It's not as tore up as this in the budget that explains the percentage of the budget and the amount in every one of those. You could divide this thing in any way you want. You could just take out the debt, the depreciation, and literally the things that aren't direct services and come up with it. But I kind of broke it down by the types of services that assembly members in the communities are generally familiar with. So when you look at that green card, and I got a clean one over here, so I'm going to go back over to Erin. You look at that card, she's got less than 5%. And that's basically everything that we do to support, the department. So anyway, a little demonstration about where your money goes. And then I just want to leave you with this.
Thank you. And so we'll go just for a couple more minutes. We're over time.
Okay.
Mr. Constant in the queue, and then we'll come back for wrap up.
Yeah,
Alright.
thanks. Lance, you said something along the lines of, we don't even pay for half of the roads.
Yeah.
And I think that's not quite accurate, because we pay for the policing on the state roads in the municipality, and
Maintenance, but
we
yeah.
pay for a number of items of maintenance. We are now clearing encampments on their land. There's any number of elements that we are in fact picking up the bill for the state. And so your number probably in general is true, and there's nuance to that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to wrap up with this. You can throw all the rest of the slides away. Keep this one. Okay. If you guys are looking to do something in the budget, please consult OMB. I mean, your idea is, it's if you come with a particular problem and you think that you have a solution, you don't work with OMB, you don't work the folks in the budget finance, and you go to the assembly and you put an amendment on the floor and they're like, that is never going to happen because it can't happen. Let's make sure that that doesn't happen. So consult with OMB. They have the ability to sort of give you some options. Bill Falsey, I don't know how many times you've heard this, but I'm going to say it again. You've got to read the first 30 pages in the overview of the budget. It will tell you everything that you need to know. The rest of the stuff is just detail, but this you want to know. A couple other pieces, the revenue project, read the revenue section. If you don't want to read the whole thing, read that page, 3.7. That lists all of the revenues. And then my parting shot, for those of you who read it from cover to cover, if I were you, the 3 appendices I would make sure that you do read is the one that Ona just mentioned, the direct cost by department. That tells you how much every department costs in their direct costs. The next one is the cost for the service area. And the gem in the pile is C. C tells us, as Ona's mentioned in the past, if you look at our budget, 60+% of it is spent on labor. That table tells us what our current and our future commitments are based on agreed upon labor agreements on percentages. So you'll see in there that I'm going to make them police department, and I can pick on any of them. They just happen to be at the top. The police budget is $143 million. Their labor is 60% of that. You add 5% to $143 million. You actually have $7 million. We got to figure out how we're going to do in 26. Do that for all of those departments. This just gives you a little insight to that. So I think it's important for you guys to be just aware of it. And then those departments that are in negotiation, they'll change. So that is my story. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much to our special guests. Yeah. And I think, yeah, we are happy that you are continuing on over at Elmore. So thank you very much for being here. And I don't see any other comments, so we will be adjourned. Thank you, everybody.